Our next speaker is a wildlife expert, a journalist, and author. He's a contributing editor to Texas Fish and Game. He's completed a book with David Weatherly, I believe he has it for sale in the back, called Wood Knocks Volume 2. He's appeared on many television shows, and on a personal note, I would like to say thank you, Jeff Cryptohulk Stewart, because during Hurricane Harvey, he came out with his crew and his boat, and him and his team rescued a lot of people. So let's welcome Jeff Cryptohulk Stewart. He said, no, there's kids here. Just don't. Bam. Over there.
You're welcome.
All the way to the back. All the way to the back. Look at that guy out there with the Astro shirt. Come on. Whoa, my goodness. Oh. All right.
Gosh, how's everybody? Are we enjoying this or what? Huh? Is this not been the greatest day around here in a long time? I want to thank every single one of y'all for coming out and sitting here and listening to me run my mouth today.
Is that their Bigfoot?
Today I'm going to talk to y'all a little bit about what I call relative invisibility in the woods. There's a lot of talk, and there's a lot of people in the Bigfoot community that put it out there that Bigfoot can shift from dimensions, go through portholes, and cloak themselves in invisibility. They try to do this because they say, oh, I saw a Bigfoot and it just disappeared in front of me. You do not have to be some Harry Potter magic creature in order to disappear in the woods. Deer do it, bears, elk, just about every animal in the natural world can use its environment, shadows, the foliage, everything in order to disappear. Anybody that hunts a whole lot in East Texas, gets in the pine thicket, you know that you can disappear. You know that you don't even have to wear expensive camo to be able to disappear. Just some earth tone colors and step in the right direction, 2 or 3 steps, and you're gone. So whenever we talk about going invisible, there's no animal, flesh and blood, with hair covered on its body, that can go invisible. Now we have animals such as the cuttlefish and different animals that live in the ocean that can camouflage their body. We even have chameleons that can change their skin tone to match their environment. But the thing is, not one of these creatures is a mammal, and not one of these creatures has a hair-covered body. Hair, to be hair, cannot change its color, cannot change and become translucent and become dark green, and all. There's no animal out there that can do that. So whenever we read these things, we must look at this with some sense of reasoning. We call this a lot of woo-woo, because we have a lot of people in the Bigfoot community, and I mean, one theory is as good as the next, but if the laws of physics get thrown out the window, then we as researchers, and even if you're just a person sitting in this audience who is just an enthusiast, a Bigfoot enthusiast, you go out on the weekend and you look for tracks or whatever, you still got to do this with some semblance of sense. You can't be out in the woods looking for a dimensional portal in order for Bigfoot to step out of. That's not going to happen.
Okay, go on.
Anybody that says that it happens, I challenge them to take me and show me. Prove it to me. There have been a half a dozen well-known Bigfoot researchers that have put this out there, and I've put it to every single one of them. Take me and show me. I will be your biggest fan. I will tell everyone scream it to the highest heavens that I was wrong and you were right. to this date, not one single one of these researchers that claim that they can go invisible or come out of portals, phase shift in and out of reality, and all of this has taken me to their area that they all keep secret and shown. And the ones that do offer to take you want you to sign a non-disclosure agreement so that you can't deny what they say happened. Their events, what I want to say, the way they say things happen is the only side that's ever going to be told, because you sign a non-disclosure agreement and you can't argue with them. So we have to be vigilant as Bigfoot researchers and even as enthusiasts not to buy into a lot of the hysteria and just the plain out lunacy that goes on in this community. Because being invisible in the woods is something I learned from my father, he learned from his father, and so forth back down the line. My first ancestor came to this country, well, before it was even this country, in 1720. The first Stewart stepped on the dirt from Scotland and decided that he liked the little Native American girl down the street, and so started the long line of my family that is Scottish and Native American, and they lived the mountain man lifestyle. Back as far as we have tracked, my ancestors were mountain men. They were trappers, they were trackers. Some of them were trackers for the Army, for the government back in the 1800s. So we've always been trackers and trappers and mountain men. And we've all learned to make ourselves invisible. We've learned to walk in the woods without making noise. I mean, I'm a big guy, but I can go out in the woods and you won't know I'm there. I can walk up behind you and you'll never know I'm coming, because I learned how to do it. Bigfoot's the same way. These are creatures that, by necessity, have to be that quiet. Because if you're not that quiet, you don't eat. These are creatures that have to go unseen because, guess what? Man kills everything that we encounter. It happens. We killed out the buffalo. Why? Because a couple of trains hit them. We want to kill them out. Indians can't eat. You know, things like that happen. As mankind, we are destroyers, and they know this. So what have they done? They've learned how to avoid us. They've learned how to be stealthy in the woods and disappear. Nothing magical. Do I have anybody that has any questions about this? Wow, no questions? Does that make sense? Wow. Golly. Man, usually, I ain't kidding you. I'm talking up in Nevada or somewhere like that, and every hand in the place goes up whenever I say that they can't turn invisible. And that's the honest truth. I get asked a lot of questions about, that's why I said the thing about the cuttlefish, is because that's what one of the folks, beautiful folks, lovely folks, nothing against them, but they ask, well, what about a cuttlefish? Cuttlefish can turn themselves translucent. Cuttlefish isn't 7 foot tall, 400-pound, hair-covered mammal. Now, when you come up to me and say the mountain gorilla can turn himself invisible, or a 10-foot, 1,500-pound grizzly bear can turn himself invisible, and we got some scientific fact on that, I'm going to be up here going, guys, I got egg on my face. I am wrong. But we can't do it. Laws of physics apply. Apply to you, apply to me. But what doesn't apply are the laws that give us boundaries as far as what we can and cannot do physically to make ourselves less visible. And that comes right down to the color of fur. What is the color of fur? Anything from a dull gray color up to a reddish color. In nature, you take that and stick it in a shadow, you can't see what's in that shadow. You just see a big blob in that shadow. Makes sense, right? Next order of business. Everybody wonder why Bigfoot, you don't catch them on trail cameras? I know Lyle touched on this just a little bit. We have certain animals in this world that can sense the bioelectric field and can sense the electrical signature of other animals and of equipment. It's been proven. I believe the echidna, the platypus, there are several creatures on this earth that, even sharks, those little holes you see in the end of a shark's nose, they use those to pick up the bioelectrical field. One of my theories that I work on is that Bigfoot also can pick up on the electrical field, the bioelectrical field, and just the electrical field. Every piece of equipment we put in the woods gives off an electrical signature. If it runs off of batteries, it gives off an electrical signature. They, like Lyle stated, they have proven this with alpha male coyotes, that they did not get pictures taken of them by trail cameras because they could sense the camera was there somehow. Now, what if you're even a more advanced creature than, say, a coyote, and you have this ability to sense electrical things? A lot of researchers have said that when they're out and they've gotten close to where Bigfoot, where they thought they were hearing the noises and things, their electrical equipment went haywire. I think this has to do with their being able to sense the bioelectrical field. And I also think that it has something to do with, just like with the electric eel and things like that, they may honestly be able to manipulate it. So I have no proof of this. It's something I'm working on. I hope to prove it one day. And I could have mud on my face for that too. But it's something I'll work on until I can't prove it. And if I ever disprove it, I'll throw it away and go with something else. Anybody have any questions? About anything. Doesn't have to be about that. Maybe about anything. I know you got a question. Yeah, I know.
Well, I was just going to ask, you talk about the electrical field, but also being able to see.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. The eyesight of these creatures is another question. Them being able to see in the infrared spectrum. They also, because all of our game cameras and a lot of our other cameras use an infrared detection system, or they use an infrared beam to point and for the camera to actually take the picture instead of a flash. And even some of your newer blackout cameras, it's a blackout camera. It still uses an infrared beam in order to trigger that camera. It still has an infrared beam that comes out, and when something breaks that beam, it trips the camera. Therefore, even with the new blackout technology, there's no infrared light that illuminates for the picture. There's still a beam that they can see. Yes, sir. See, I knew you were going to have something to add. You're too smart not to. Who else? Come on. Yes, ma'am. Good question, and yes, ma'am. The coloration of the hair or lack thereof could refract light in a certain manner that would make them, just like they appear blurry in pictures and things like that. If the translucent, like you're talking about fur, if a certain number, it doesn't even have to be every hair. If only a few of those, it could actually refract the light and actually make that look blurry. Make them look blurry in a picture and give them a different look. And also, you know, there's talk, a lot of research and a lot of talk on them being able to use infrasound. Because there are certain animals in the animal kingdom that use infrasound to disorient and everything. And infrasound has been said that may be one reason why we can't get a picture. That may be one reason why when people see them, they talk about getting sick at their stomach, getting a headache. And if they used infrasound to disorient you, it would be very simple for them to just escape and get away while you're swimmy-headed and disoriented. And the next thing you know, man, he just disappeared. Well, 5 minutes may have passed. You don't know. Now, I can't prove anything about infrasound. I am not an expert in any animal. I'm from Texas. I study snakes and deer and hogs and things like that. So infrasound is something I really want to look into more, but I'm so busy with stuff in Texas. You know, 'cause we got the best place in the world, don't we? We got the best place to look for Bigfoot. I mean, the state of Texas, we've got everything from swamps to deserts. We got mountains. We've got piney woods. They're not big mountains, but come on, the Davis Mountains, they're mountains. They're mountains. They're mountains. But, you know, we've got Big Bend National Park up there. I mean, we've got such a diverse geography on Texas that we could go just about hunt anything we want to hunt in Texas, whether it exists or not, and whether people believe it or not. You know what? If you're out there having a good time looking for it, who cares? If you want to go look for Bigfoot and say Bigfoot's got big pink wings and flies through the air, and you're out there looking for it, as long as you're not hurting yourself or anybody, get after it. Yes, sir.
Have you had an encounter with Bigfoot? And if so,
Wow, yes, I have had 2 face-to-face encounters. My first one was when I was 16 years old, 1986. Sabine River bottom in Panola County. 2 of my friends and I were camping. We would catch our fish and we would skin them and we would leave the entrails, the guts, at our little hand pump well. We would come back later, and if the raccoons or possums or whatever were eating there, we'd shoot them. I sold hides. That's how I made my money when I was a kid. We were a very poor family, and I trapped and sold raccoon and wolf and coyote, whatever I could get. You know, because back then a raccoon hide sold for $25, and minimum wage was $3 an hour. So in order to make $25, I'd have to work a whole day. So, and it's just math, you know. And we ate our dinner, and about 10 o'clock that night, I asked my buddies, I said, hey, let's go over here and see what's eating the guts. And they, man, we don't want to go. We're full. We're sitting there by the campfire. You go. So I grabbed my 22 and my flashlight. And if anybody remembers the mid-'80s, we did not have the flashlights that we have today. We didn't have a 1500 lumen or a, 10-watt flashlight with rechargeable. We didn't have any of that. We had a 2C cell yellow bulb flashlight that we just hoped we didn't trip over something going to the bathroom with, right? So here I go bebopping across our camp, about 100 yards from our well to where our cabin was, our camp house. And I bebop across there and I get about 30 yards, 40 yards from where the guts are, so I slow down. I got my little 22 ready and I'm shining my light, and sure enough, I see something humped over the guts. I thought it was maybe 2, 3 raccoons or maybe a wild hog that was eating that. So I'm easing up inch by inch with this light. Whatever it was, noticed the light, and it stood up. It stood up on 2 legs. And of course, in my mind at this time, the closest thing I knew to Bigfoot is, Boggy Creek. We'd seen the movie back at the drive-in 20 years before, 15 years, whatever it was. Creature from Black Lake, we saw that, I was on the Late Show one night, but Bigfoot wasn't in my head. Been hunting and fishing in these woods my whole life. I'd never seen Bigfoot, never even heard of Bigfoot. Nobody talked about Bigfoot. So In my mind, this is somebody playing a joke on me. So I've got my light shining in its eyes. I've got my gun aimed between its eyes, and I said, "Mister, I don't know who you are, but I'm fixing to shoot you." Didn't say a word, just looking at me. And again, I said, "Mister, I am scared and I am fixing to kill you." Didn't move. I took a step forward, had my gun leveled on it. It looks at me, and at this point in time, I realize that this isn't somebody, this is something. I'm 6 foot tall, and at the time I probably weighed about 190, 95 pounds. This thing was about 2 or 3 inches taller than me and about my size, but way more muscular looking than me. The fur on its body was a finer fur. It wasn't a coarse fur, it was pretty fine. It was hot, summertime. But it had been wallowing in the mud, and the hair hung off of it like dreadlocks. And you could see the gray river bottom mud caked on its body, but the thing that was distinct was its face. If you've ever seen an Australian Aboriginal, that's what it looked like in the face. It did not look like a monkey. It did not look like your quintessential picture of Bigfoot that's plastered everywhere with the more ape-looking features. This thing had a very flat, broad nose. The nostrils were very large. But it had lips like me, but very exaggerated. It didn't have a big, huge, sloping forehead and all that. It looked like a human being in the face, but a primitive type human being. It did not look like me or you, but it looked no different than me or you than me and you looked than me and you. You know, not all human beings look the same. Chinese people look different than Jewish people. You know what I'm saying? So this thing had that Aboriginal look to it. And I remember distinctly, and this is what stuck in my mind, it started moving away from me and it was walking backwards, toe to heel. Now, I've had people say, "Oh, you saw a bear." Bears cannot walk toe to heel. When a bear walks backwards, it's clumsy. They just kind of waddle forwards or back if they're on 2 legs. They don't walk fluidly. This walked fluidly on 2 legs, toe to heel, backwards. Took 3 long strides backwards, and it was in the edge of the woods and it disappeared. It was still there, but I couldn't see it. Even with my flashlight, crappy flashlight that it was, but I still could not see this creature. Even though it was a mere 10, 15 feet in front of me. It turned, and I heard it. I listened to it walk away. It never ran, never got upset, it never ran. Walked away. I went back to my friends, told my friends what I saw. My friends said, "Yeah, right, tell us another one. You're just trying to scare us." And I'm like, "Really, I saw this?" And they're like, "Whatever, Stewart. Yeah, we believe you, buddy. Drink another one." I'd had Dr. Pepper. That's all I'd had. Next morning we get up, we go over to this hand pump well that we had, and it's muddy on the ground. And sure enough, right there on the ground is a bare footprint. Now, I wear a 14.5 Triple E shoe. And I had on a pair of boots. And I stepped in that track with my size 14 Triple E boot. And that track was wider and longer than my 14 Triple E boot. And when I stepped down, which back then I weighed about 200 pounds, 190 pounds. When I stepped down, I barely indented a 1/4 of an inch, and this was down a 1/2 an inch. So whatever this was that was my size was so much more muscular than me, because muscle is heavy. It was so much more muscular that it probably outweighed me by 50 pounds or more, but it was relatively the same size. That was first face-to-face. Second face-to-face was 4 years ago. I was looking for mayhaws. Everybody here know what mayhaws are?
Yep.
I was wanting to make some mayhaw jelly. So I parked my truck and walked down the old slough bed, because the mayhaw trees grow along that slough bed. I get about 150 yards and I'm walking down a hog trail, a thick hog trail. And I hear something crash in the bushes to my left. And I walk over to see what it was, because of course I'm sitting there, I got my gun, and I'm thinking it was a hog. I'm easing over there because, I like to barbecue hogs. So I ease over there, and there's a stick laying in these bushes that's probably about 2.5, maybe 3 feet long, about big around as a Coke can. and this stick had been freshly snapped off of something. And as I'm looking, I look up, and there's no trees up above it with limbs that big around. And there's nothing broken up above it. And as I'm sitting here looking at this, I hear a loud thud behind me. And it hit the ground hard enough. I'm on an old slough bed, so it's kind of underneath, it's wet. The ground on top kind of wet, so when it hit, it shook. And it shook. And I wheeled around, and as I wheeled around, I was sitting there staring. It was sitting on its haunches. It was like whenever you jump and you cushion yourself with your legs. And it's sitting there, and its palms are flat on the ground. And it's looking up at me, smiling. Or what I call smiling, showing its teeth. It's looking at me. I got a .357 Magnum rifle, lever action, over my shoulder. I go to grab the gun and pull the gun up, and it was no longer showing its teeth. It was just looking at me. And something in my mind said, take a picture. Don't kill it. Take a picture. And I grabbed, for my camera, lens cap was on. I took the lens cap off, and when I dropped the lens cap, it's on a little tether, it hits the side of the camera, and it makes a metallic-y sound. And at this point, this thing takes off running. I played college football, played a little semi-pro football. I worked with guys that could run 4.3 40s. I worked with guys that won national titles in track and field. I've never seen anything run that fast in my life. Well, it was running, it never got above this high off the ground, and it was using its arms to run just as much as it was using its legs. Every so often it would reach out with its arm and like it would either use it to stabilize itself or to help pull itself. It covered about a 60-yard opening in about 3 to 4 seconds. From a dead stop in a squat to gone. And of course, I'm hitting the button, and my camera's set on where it takes 30 pictures at a time. So I'm hitting the button, doing this. I got me a good blob squatch picture because there wasn't nothing in focus, so I don't show it to anybody. But you know, Cliff and Bobo and I, we all looked at it, and we're like, you know, there's something in the picture, but we can't tell what it is, and so I don't show it because I don't believe in blob squatch pictures. They don't prove anything. But this thing was there. I've had a lot of people ask me, what do you think this creature was trying to do? I think it was trying to get away from me. Because in all honesty, it saw a big white guy coming through the woods with a gun. And probably throughout this creature's entire life, it has been taught that that equals death. Because living in the woods that I hunt in regularly and that I'm in regularly, you know these things have to observe me. And they see that I hunt, and they see that I shoot these animals, they see that I skin them and I eat them. I mean, I'm not a trophy hunter. I don't, you know, my trophies are back straps and bacon, you know, you can tell. But, you know, it was just trying to get away from me. I do not believe in killing Bigfoot. Other people do. I don't. I don't want to kill anything just to prove it lives. Kind of, to me, that's counterproductive. Anybody else have a question? Yes, sir. Nothing like I've ever seen in my life. I've never seen another animal that was a bipedal animal that ran like that. And I've never seen hogs, bears, deer, anything that ran as that ran. It was some of the most fluid movement I've ever seen. If I had to compare it to anything, it would be more like the movements of a cat, if I had to say. But then again, it wasn't a cat, you know, but that's the closest thing I could say that it looked like when it was running away from me, was how, you know, when a cat runs, how smooth a cat runs. Dogs run, they're kind of doing this. Bears run, they're doing this. Different animals, except for maybe greyhounds or something that are born runners, dogs and things run a little choppier. This thing was fluid and smooth. Its back was straight out and it was going away. More like a cheetah or something along those lines. A female lion, when it's going after a wildebeest, If you've ever watched that on the Discovery Channel, you've seen how this thing moved. Yes, sir.
If the second encounter looked like the first one.
Very close. The face on both creatures was a mahogany color, a very dark, almost patent leather look to it, shiny. You can see the weathered but oily look to the skin. The first one was because I had a flashlight in its face and I could tell, but the second one, being daylight, it was really easy to tell. That second one, its face looked like if you've taken an old pair of leather boots and put a good oil coating on them before you go to work because you don't want your boots to leak. That's kind of what it is. Put a little mink oil on that bad boy. That's what the face looked like. It was very shiny, it was very oily, but you could see the cracks. The weathered look around the eyes. You could see that. I mean, I was 5 foot from this thing, so believe me, I was looking. And like I said, the face, there was nothing monkey about this face. Golly, yes sir, I'll get you next. Panola County. Both of my sightings are on the same piece of property within a quarter mile of one another. Yes, sir.
What are some of the hot spots? You can't be specific. Honeywood, River Bottom, around the lakes in Southeast Texas. We heard about everywhere else but Southeast Texas.
Around here, hot spots, you know, of course the National Forest up here is a hot spot. You want to find a place where there's lots of game animals. You want a spot that's, if the hogs have overrun a spot, that's where you want to be. If there are so many raccoons that you can't leave your ice chest in the back of the truck because the coons are going to rob you blind, that's where you want to be. If you go down there and there's so many animals, like I said, nuisance animals. If you find a spot and there's nutria rats everywhere in a lake, beavers everywhere in the lake, that's where you want to be, because that's easy pickings for an animal that needs to eat. And they don't have to move very far in order to eat because you got something that wants to remain hidden. So they don't want to have to walk 2 miles over here to get dinner. They want to be able to eat right here. If you got a place like cattails growing up around something, that's a very nutritious food. You pull up the cattails and eat the stalk and eat the root of the cattail. Very nutritious. White oak acorns. You find a spot that's got white oak acorns, you're going to have hogs, you're going to have deer, you're going to have squirrels, you're going to have everything that eats a white oak acorn, plus the white oak acorns themselves are palatable. Of all the acorns that you can get, chinkapins and white oak acorns are about the only 2 acorns that are very palatable. The rest have so many tannins in them that if you take a bite, it's like eating a persimmon, you know, it draws your face up. So you get the white oak acorns, you get all the other animals. Who's next? Yes, ma'am.
Reacting to you as an aggression?
No.
Or do you feel it was
Scared to death. Scared to death of me. Even though it was my size, it was as big as me, it was scared to death of me. The one when I was 16 years old did not seem scared of me, but it seemed very wary of me. It knew what a gun was. I had a gun pointed at it. It knew what that gun was. If not, it would have come took it away from me and whooped my butt. Because, I mean, even though at 16 I thought I was one tough son of a gun, that thing could have whooped me without looking twice. Yes? Anybody?
When you heard it behind you, do you think it dropped out of the tree?
It jumped out of a tree. Yes, ma'am. The tree that it came out of, about 18, 16 feet up in the tree, there was a natural saddle in that tree. My theory is it was in that saddle with that stick that it threw, waiting on a sounder of hogs to come under that trail. And whenever one that it wanted to eat come under that, it was going to bail out of that tree with that stick. And coming from 20 feet, 18 feet up in a tree, weighing 200 pounds, by the time it landed on top of a hog with a stick, broke neck, dinner. So if it wanted to have jumped out of that tree on me, I'd have been a goner. So therefore, it didn't see me as a food source. It saw me as something it wanted to get away from. And I think when it hit the ground, have any of y'all ever jumped from a height and got that electricity feeling that goes through your body and just, oh my Lord, it just buckles your knees? I think that's what happened. It jumped out of the tree. When it hit the ground, it kind of shocked it. And it, oh my Lord, it froze for a minute till that feeling went away. And that's when it kind of froze. And I had it with a gun and everything. It was kind of like, what do I do? And I think it was an adolescent. I think it was a youngster. I mean, this wasn't, footprints that it left behind were not your typical, 18, 20-inch long track. It was relatively human-sized track. Yes, ma'am. Its body was covered in hair, but very sparsely. Now, we're talking July. Not really July. It was April, May. It was still hot. It was 80, 90 degrees or further, so anything that has fur in East Texas has started shedding that fur, getting down to its bare minimum because it's hot. But at the same time, it has to combat the mosquitoes and the deer flies, so it had been wallowing in the mud. Everything else wallows in the mud to get rid of them, so that's what it had been doing. And so that's when that fur was hanging. Both of the creatures that I saw had been wallowing in the mud. Both times it was summertime. And it was the oddest looking thing. If you've ever seen like a picture on TV of a Lhasa Apso or something, that the fur's all matted up and you feel sorry for the little dog, one of them rescue dogs or something, that's kind of what it looked like. And the fur, but it was sparser, but that's what hung, was that clumped up mud and bramble infused stuff that was hanging just like it had wallowed in the mud. Well, of course it smelled. I was in the middle of a swamp. I was in the middle of a slough, so the methane, the decaying leaf litter was all around me, so it automatically had that smell going on in the area that I was in. So could I say that I specifically smelled that creature? No, ma'am. I can't say I specifically smelled it. I did smell that methane, decaying leaf litter smell, but it was all around me. You had a question?
Yeah, in a place as dry as Texas, what kind of shelters does Sasquatch?
Well, when we talk about Texas being dry, in all honesty, where I'm at in Northeast Texas, we're full of swamps. I got more sloughs and swamps around me than they got in South Louisiana. We've got the same terrain. I mean, I live on the Sabine River. It's wet. Until we hit a severe drought in the summertime, that's the only time it's not wet around me. So, shelters, as far that I have found what I described in my early days as finding beaver huts built on dry land. When I was a teenager, I never knew what these were. We'd go out there hunting, and you come up on it and you're like, what is this? What in the world is this beaver hut doing built? Not in the middle of the slough out here, but 500 yards through the woods in the middle of the hardwood timber, there's a beaver hut. Well, never climbed in one. And there could be cottonmouths or anything else in there, so we didn't mess with them as kids. Now that I'm an adult and we go back and we find them, I've found several on my property before they came in and clear-cut it. But found several, and we did take hair samples and different things out of them. Sad to say I was involved in a very frivolous DNA study that will go unnamed around here because she lied to us all. But I had several samples in that study, and I lost those samples. Yes, sir.
Have you ever heard any stories or seen evidence of them hunting alligators? Using alligators to prey?
Now, I have had stories come to me from friends of mine, actually Miss Dana Holyfield. Her father was Harlan Ford, the Honey Island Swamp Monster, the whole 9 yards. I am friends with Dana. And so I've had a lot of stories come through her to me of people seeing alligators, small gators that had been eaten and gnawed upon on the bank. And people are like, well, it couldn't have been another large gator because the bites that were taken out were rounded, very human-like, weren't ripped out, were actually bit out. I have had reports of them eating gators, just nothing around here. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that they could be capable of opening up a, we had body wire and boat, and we brought one, and we would come back and found footprints, and probably like gone.
Yes, ma'am. That is a story I hear a lot, and it actually happened to my father and I. We had caught about 150 pounds of blue cats in the river. Didn't want to skin them that evening. It was pretty cool, but the river had just flooded, so you got to get out there and catch them blues when that flood water's going. So we had come back and we put our fish trap, our box, which is any of y'all remember the old chicken coops that were about yay thick and had the hinge lid on them and stuff like that? Well, that's what we use for a box. We take some pool noodles and attach it to it with some tie wire and float it out there with our fish in it. Well, we had done that. I had tied the lid, plus it had the spring-loaded latch, and we slid it out there in the water. The next morning, we went down there to get our fish to clean them, and our fish box was pulled completely up out of the water. I had about 150 pounds of fish in it, plus about, 20, 30 pounds of box. So it pulled it up out of the water, it untied, didn't gnaw in two, didn't cut, nothing like that, it untied. So it had to have dexterity in its fingers to untie the knot. Then pull back the spring-loaded latch, open it. There were catfish heads laying all around. There were human-looking footprints, bare footprints. It was 36 degrees that morning, ladies and gentlemen. 36 degrees, and there were barefoot human footprints where this thing had sat right there on top of my box and had eaten about 10 or 15 two-pound blue cat. And the blue cat were so fresh that some, you know how blue cats, even after you cut the head off, they sit there and some of them mouths were still moving. Pretty much, they heard us coming down the road. Yes, sir.
Let me stop. You said human footprints.
Mm-hmm.
Did they look like human footprints and not like what we saw today?
All the footprints evidence that I have found and I have taken, the footprints look more human than your normal Bigfoot footprint that you see. Now, I'm not saying that those Bigfoot footprints are not authentic, because everybody's foot looks different. You know, I got a huge foot, you got a small foot. I got a flat foot, you got a good arch in there. You know, and I think these creatures, they have just as diverse physical appearance as we do. They don't all look like cookie cutter Bigfoot. So, yes, the footprints that I saw that day and that I have seen 1,000 times since then are very, very human looking, human size. And when I say human size, like I said, I wear a 14 and a half. I got a buddy that wears a size 16 shoe. So there are some very big human footprints. Yes, sir.
What I saw was actually, was in Bigfoot. It's down like in the 20s at night. I made it my lines in the evening. That's the fall.
Yes, sir. Was it green or brown or black polywogs? Reason I ask that is because I have found that they really like the lighter colored polywogs, because I bait up with polywogs too certain times a year, and they'll get them.
This thing, like say, in 20s and 30s, footprint is like about a size 12. I figured my max, like a size 12. But it wasn't black. I followed his tracks. Where he went down the road, and the back road. Waded the back water, and over a ridge. Right, and after that, I started firing in my boat, my brother alive around the ridge. He went off 3 ridges, went through about a 1/4-mile wide cavern in this stream, and they just backed up.
Human being would have been dead from hypothermia long before they made it through all that. No, sir. That's very typical from what my research has found. That behavior.
That was just the one
You have generally, from my research, I have found evidence most family groups, you have at least 4 to 5 different size footprints that you will find in a general area. You will generally find an adolescent footprint that has, if it's a male that has not been forced out yet. You will find the mother's footprint, which is very large, but not nearly as large as the alpha male. And you will find smaller siblings, because in just my belief, I have no proof of this, I think that these creatures' gestation period is quite a long time. I think that they have a more like a 12-month to 14-month or longer gestation period. Therefore, when the baby's born, it's very developed. That way, within a matter of hours, like a deer or a calf, it's up walking and moving around and able to masticate, able to chew, able to eat food. It's not totally dependent on the mother's breast for its nutrients. That's why it's one of my beliefs. I have no proof in this. That's just a theory that I work on. But I do think that you have, from what I've seen, you have several different age groups. The mother will generally be pregnant with child, have one that's probably walking, toddling, have one that is pre-adolescent, and have an adolescent that is either close to being brought in. If it's female, it's going to be brought into the family group. If it's male, it's going to be pushed out. So because the alpha male is not going to want inbreeding, and he's not going to stand for a small male in his group. People can find out about me. Generally, look me up on Facebook, Cryptohulk. Not hard to find me. You can look up what I do. Wood Knox Volume 2. Just got through with that one. It's available. I sold out of them today. Sorry. I have, just about anything you want to see. Go YouTube, and you can see my presentations at other shows and different things. Just Cryptohulk, and you can find me. Yes, sir. Chester's one of my best friends, and he's actually my boss. I write for Texas Fish and Game magazine. I'm a contributing editor. Yes, sir. Chester's one of my best friends. I help him with his ministry from time to time. The Children's Kingdom, I've done some things with him. Help him with his animals mainly. Chester's a great guy. I spent some time in Orange, rescued quite a few people in that area during the hurricane. We went down. I was recruited by the Cajun Navy, and we formed the Texas Navy at that time. And I loaded up a whole bunch of folks from up there where I'm at, and we headed out. And personally, my boat motor, I run up on a F-150 and tore up my boat motor, so it didn't bother me. I got in the water and with a rope, and I pulled my boat, and sometimes I swam pulling my boat, and just by doing that, I took 18 more people out. Total, in 2 days, we pulled out 6,000 people in 2 days. Thank you. Thank you. And we're ready to do it again if it happens. We're already, we're forming up. We're getting our stuff together. We're getting our boats ready. God forbid that we have to do it again, but we're ready. Yeah, we don't want to, but like I said, we're ready. We've already got everything coordinated, and we're ready to go. Well, I am done. I hope y'all enjoyed listening to me run my mouth, and that's one of my favorite things to do is run my mouth. So I'm going to turn it back over to Ann, and hope y'all enjoy, and hope y'all have had a really great time, because I know I have.
Jeff Cryptohulk Stewart, everybody. Love that guy.
If you liked this video, be sure to check out our other content and get connected on our page and social media sites. Every day, new discoveries are being made all across the world and beyond, so let's work together to find out what's next. And remember, we won't know if we don't go. I'll see you in the Vortex.